Are you a software engineer that's concerned about job security in the ever changing tech landscape? You're not alone. In this video, we've gathered insights from industry leaders to help you future proof your career, how to avoid and survive layoffs. First up, we have Zia Mohammed, Senior Product Manager at Amazon, who discusses the pitfalls of short term thinking and how it can hurt your career.
I think the thing that I've learned is if you have a long-term plan, people come at you and they'll be like, "Oh, what's your 5 year?" It's like, okay, calm down, right? Like you can think about like your plan in like 2 years, maybe a year. But what I really advocate for is long-term thinking. If you know where you want to go, and let's say you want to do like 10 different things, I'll use some hyperbole. Let's say you want to be an ambassador. Let's say you want to be an astronaut. Let's say you want to like run a fintech company or something like that. Going back to my earlier point about finding your pivot, I think one, it's important to figure out how you would make those transitions between them, but then also know where you want to go in the end. Because if you know where you want to go in the long term, the short term decisions you make won't be limited to that point in time. When you're evaluating an opportunity or a decision, you'll be able to say, okay, I want to do this in 2 years, or I want to be here in 5 years, 10 years, whatever. How does this impact that? And if you're just focused on short term things like, oh, this will help me do XYZ, or this will give me this much more money, it can negatively impact your long term plan. And by long term plan, I'm not saying you have to have like, it written down in some Word document or Notion or whatever. Just have an idea and start connecting the dots. Maybe make like a mind map of like, this is where I am, this is where I want to go. And then just start drawing or writing in bullet points of like where you want to be in between them. And to your earlier point, I've become a advocate of long-term thinking because if you would have asked me like 7 years ago or 10 years ago, like, oh, do you want to be in product management? I would have been like, I have no idea what that is. But I would have known that like, hey, I want to do this in the next year or next 2 years. And so the decisions that I made in that time might have not set me up to be a product manager, but at the end of the day, they got me to where I am. So can't complain.
Next, Michael Rufkin, Engineering Manager from Google Sheets, shares his insights on navigating the technology hype cycle and staying focused on what truly matters for your career progression.
So the number one thing to know is you want to be somewhat of a computer science historian. And I think that if you have a traditional computer science degree and you really sort of pause and understand it and think what you learn, you have a tremendous weapon versus folks who are coming in from non-computer science backgrounds or coding schools or whatever it is. Why? If you have some of those core computer science classes in your background, one of the biggest things you're going to see is like, oh, wait a second. A lot of these ideas have been around since the 70s and 80s. There's nothing really all that new here. So you're able to pattern match fairly quickly what you're seeing now with what was there before. And you're like, oh, great. So now we have dependency injection in JavaScript or whatever else using, Angular. Great. That solves the dependency injection problem, which was solved 20 years ago with Java. Great. So it's like you can sort of pattern match very quickly. Do we need it in my current project? Not really. So it's irrelevant. Move on, right? So it's these kinds of things. You see, what's that new build framework? I can't remember. A build tool that just came out a few years ago. So everybody's running to use that. Well, it solves a very real problem with performance for building a lot of these applications. And so, yeah, so okay, there's a new tool. How does it do it? Oh, there's a lot more caching. Okay, got it. I know what's happening there. So the more well-versed you are in the overall sort of like ecosystem of all of the things that exist in the computer science literature, the more you read, the more you do this, the less you get excited about the technology, the more you just sort of like, hey, it's just another use case of that. It's an improvement on this. It is an optimization of that. And you're like, we can use that. Most of this is garbage.
Sean Hickson, Engineering Manager at Google, is up next, and he shares valuable advice on how to stay adaptable and relevant as the tech industry continues to evolve at a very rapid pace.
Understand that you should always be learning. You want to maintain mental agility, right? Not agile in the sense of software development, but you want to always be thinking about how can we be doing things differently? And look, we live in an era of unlimited information that is available to us, whether it's podcasts or YouTube courses or massive online courses that you can take, right? You can get any sort of information you want. And I know like back in 2003, 2004, I was looking at Slashdot a lot, right? And I was looking at Hacker News is certainly something that still exists where you can sort of just like see what people are doing. But read the product blogs from companies who are doing things that you find interesting, right? Like a lot of companies are pretty open about what they're doing. Like if you look at the Amazon Builders Library or Google Cloud Library, you can find a lot of information from people who built these really foundational systems that the internet runs on. You can learn about how those are built. And I think it's the same sort of thing if you're more interested in building front end or more product driven things. The information is out there. Use your favorite search engine and get out there and keep an open mind and set aside some time for yourself to learn a new language or learn a new framework or brush up on your computer science fundamentals, which is something that I think we can all benefit from. And just always be learning.
Laura Ferguson, a former senior engineering manager at Google and a tech veteran, shares her experiences with technology shifts throughout her career and how she's managed to stay ahead of the curve.
So coming out of college, I did not know object-oriented coding because it was not predominant. I knew a little bit about it, but not enough to really code. I knew C, and I knew Pascal and Modula 2, which was precursor. And I went into some programming jobs, and we worked in Lisp, which was great and somewhat very functional. And then there was a project I wanted to work on in C++. I got onto the project. I was the lead, but I didn't really know C++. So I was like, okay, I have to get over this hump. I looked at all my references. This is pre-internet, so we used books. I really dug into it and realized I needed a mind shift change. And that was going to be more than I could take on single-handedly. Now we have communities, we have Stack Overflow. You can really get the mind shift change just by reading what's out there on the internet. It's so much easier now. But at the time, I was very aware that that's what had to happen. So I actually took a class. And just going through the work, the basic stuff, just like sometimes people go through tutorials or whatever, that really helps you shift your mindset in terms of how you think about a particular programming language. So I did that to learn C++. And then when I felt very comfortable with that, I took another class. I started studying Java, and then I did Java programming for 13 years. But really the core of the way I thought about object-oriented programming was coming from that class. And then when I got to web development, I realized I had to do something similar. I didn't find the perfect class, but I did do a lot of work using the internet. And I came to web development late because I was doing Java desktop applications. But when I got there, it's like, okay, I have to learn this. And I had done a lot of front end in Java, but that's not the same as web development front end. And I ended up deciding to be more of a generalist and moving more towards a lead role in general web development. So that added a whole bunch of new requirements and skills I had to learn. And really the whole way, and I read Carol Dweck way back in grad school. So the whole way I was really channeling this idea of, okay, it's not about who I am, it's about what I want to be, like how I'm going to get there. What do I have to learn? And so that really shaped me. So I think it stands the test of time that people are now talking about it.
Finally, we have Michael Rufkin, engineering manager from Google Sheets, who provides actionable tips on how to future-proof your software engineering career amidst the constant technological advancements.
My personal opinion is that over time, software engineers are going to become much more business-minded. They're going to have a lot more business acumen and say in product direction and in revenue direction and in where things are, customers are headed. And they're going to have this slightly new breed of software engineers who are like, we really should be launching feature X because we think that's going to make us more money than feature Y that we're losing money on. So I think that's going to become much more of a thing than what we have now.
If you enjoyed this clip, make sure you watch the entire video, which has a lot more content just like this. And if you want to make sure you don't miss any of our episodes where we talk to leaders in the tech industry, from software engineers to product managers to engineering manager, make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel and also click the notification bell.